Commander Taho Kim stood alone on the observation deck of the UES Dauntless. His dark eyes were fixed on the main view screen. The stars looked normal, peaceful even, but the ship's sensors told a different story. "Commander," a voice called from behind him. "They're coming." Taho turned to see Lieutenant Jun Park. The young officer's face was pale, but his voice stayed steady. "How many?" Taho asked. "More than we can count, sir. Hundreds of ships. Maybe thousands." Taho nodded slowly. Humanity had been in space for almost 100 years. They had built homes on Mars and Europa. They had even reached the nearest star system. Along the way, they had met other beings from space. Most were friendly traders. None were like this. "Send a message to Earth. Tell them we have confirmed the approach of an unknown fleet. All civilian ships should return to Earth at once." "Yes, sir." June bowed slightly and left. Taho looked back at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Nerak Collective was coming. 3 days ago, their message had reached every human outpost and colony. Surrender or be destroyed. No one knew why they had chosen Earth. No one knew what they wanted. But Taho had seen enough war to know what was coming. In a tall building in what was once Seoul, Director Han Ali called the emergency meeting to order. Around the round table sat the 12 members of the United Earth Defense Council. "The alien fleet will reach our outer defense line in 6 hours, she said. Her short gray hair framed a face lined with worry. "General Yu, what are our options?" General Yu, a tall man with a thick mustache, stood up. "Our moon base is ready. The Mars fleet is on its way back. But Director Lee, we must be honest. We have never faced a threat this big." "What do we know about them?" asked Dr. Daewon Choi, the head of Alien Technology Studies. Hannah pressed a button, and a hologram appeared above the table. It showed strange ships shaped like arrowheads. They were black with red lights. "The Nerak Collective," she said. "Based on what our deep space probes have learned, they see other life forms as either things to use or things to remove. They have destroyed at least 3 other worlds that we know of." "Their weapons?" General Yu asked. Dr. Choi touched some controls, and a hologram changed to show energy readings. "They use a kind of energy we don't fully understand yet, but there's something interesting about how they fight." He pointed to a pattern in the data. "They all act together, like they share one mind. This makes them very strong, but also maybe easier to predict once we learn their ways." Hannah stood up. "I won't lie to you. This is the greatest danger humanity has ever faced. But we will not surrender. We will show these Nerak what humans do when cornered." She looked each council member in the eye. "We fight." Sun Mi Kang walked home from her lab, lost in thought. At 32, she was one of Earth's top scientists in quantum physics. Today, she had been working on a new theory about space-time when the news about the alien fleet had reached her. The streets of Seoul were busy with people rushing to get supplies. The government had told everyone to stay calm, but people knew something big was happening. Sun Mi looked up at the evening sky. The stars were just becoming visible. Somewhere up there, the fate of humanity was being decided. Her phone rang. It was her mother. "Sun Mi, are you coming for dinner? Your father is cooking your favorite." "Yes, Mother. I'll be there in 20 minutes." Sun Mi smiled. Even with aliens about to attack, her mother still worried about dinner. Maybe that was the best way to face the end of the world. By doing normal things with the people you love. She never made it to dinner. The Nerak attacked without warning. One moment, Commander Taho Kim was watching the alien fleet hold position just beyond the moon. The next, bright beams of red energy shot past the Dauntless, heading straight for Earth. "All ships, defensive positions," he shouted. "Protect the civilian transports." On the bridge, chaos erupted as officers called out reports. "They're targeting major cities. Seoul is hit. Shanghai is under attack. Los Angeles reports multiple impacts." Taho gripped the edge of his command chair. The Dauntless shook as enemy fire grazed their shields. "Return fire. All batteries," he ordered. The human ships fought bravely. The Dauntless managed to destroy 3 enemy vessels before taking heavy damage. But there were too many. For every Narek ship they destroyed, 10 more took its place. "Sir," Lieutenant Jun reported, blood running down his face from a cut on his forehead. "Earth Defense Command is ordering all remaining ships to fall back to Mars. We're to protect the evacuation transports." Tai-Ho stared at the main screen. Earth, his beautiful blue home, now had angry red wounds visible even from space. Fires burned across entire continents. The death toll must already be in the billions. "Set course for Mars," he said quietly, "and record everything. The people who survived need to know what happened here today." Sunli woke up under a pile of rubble. Her head hurt, and she could taste blood in her mouth. The last thing she remembered was a flash of red light, then the building collapsing around her. Slowly, painfully, she crawled out from under the broken concrete. What she saw made her stop breathing for a moment. Seoul was gone. Where the beautiful city had stood, there was now just burning ruins as far as she could see. The air was filled with black smoke. In the distance, strange ships with red lights moved through the sky, shooting at anything that moved. Her parents' home was just 10 blocks away. Sunli knew, without having to check, that they were gone. Everyone was gone. She sat down on a broken wall and stared at her hands. They were covered in dust and blood. Tears made clean tracks down her dirty face. Something moved in the ruins nearby. Sunli froze. A figure emerged, human, a man in a torn military uniform. "Are you hurt?" he asked, approaching carefully. I don't think so," Sunli said. "What happened?" "The Narek attacked without warning. Most of our defense systems were taken out in the first wave." He looked up at the smoke-filled sky. "I'm Sergeant Ho Jin Baek. I'm trying to gather survivors. There's a research bunker about 5 kilometers from here that might still be safe." "I'm Dr. Sunmi Kang. I work at the Quantum Physics Institute." The soldier's eyes widened slightly. "Dr. Kang, your work might be very important now. Some of your colleagues may have made it to the bunker." Sunmi stood up, her shock giving way to something else. As she looked at the destroyed city around her, at everything and everyone she had lost, a cold, clear feeling settled in her chest. "They think they've won," she said quietly. "They think they've broken us." Sergeant Baek handed her a canteen of water. "They don't know humans very well, do they?" Sunmi took a drink, then handed it back. Her mind was already racing, thinking about Narek technology, about the quantum patterns that might explain their weapons, about ways to fight back. "No," she said, "but they're going to learn." In orbit around Mars, the remains of Earth's space fleet gathered. The Red Planet's colonies were now humanity's last major outpost. Emergency shelters were being built to house the few million who had escaped Earth. On the damaged bridge of the Dauntless, Commander Tai-Ho Kim watched the latest reports come in. Earth was not completely lost. There were pockets of resistance, underground bases that had survived, remote areas the Narek hadn't bothered to hit yet, but civilization as they knew it was gone. "Sir," Lieutenant Jun said, "Director Lee is alive. She's established a command center in the Himalayan bunker and is calling for all remaining military leaders to coordinate." Tai-Ho nodded. "Tell her the Dauntless is damaged but operational. We'll fight until the last human draws breath." As he looked at the tired, determined faces of his crew, Tai-Ho felt something strange. It wasn't fear, and it wasn't just anger. It was a cold certainty that this was not the end. The Narek had made a terrible mistake. They had hurt humanity, but they hadn't killed it. And now, they would learn what humans do when pushed to the edge. They don't break. They burn. 6 months had passed since the Narek attack. What remained of humanity now lived underground or in hidden mountain bases. The surface of Earth was mostly empty, poisoned by strange radiation from Narak weapons. Colonel Sang-hyuk-yoon stood in the main control room of Bunker 7, deep under the mountains that were once called the Himalayas. Maps and screens covered the walls, showing the few places where humans still fought. "Report," he said to the tired officers around him. "We lost contact with Titan Colony last night," said Ji-woo Wang, the communications officer. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep. "The Europa base is still sending messages, but they're under heavy attack." Sang-hyuk closed his eyes for a moment. Before the war, he had led troops in the Mars colony fights. Those seemed like simple problems now. "What about the moon base?" "Still holding, sir. The Narak seem more interested in Earth for now." Sang-hyuk nodded and turned to a large screen showing Earth. Red dots marked Narak bases. Blue dots showed human strongholds. There were many red dots and very few blue ones. "And our forces here." Major Ta-sung Choi stepped forward with a tablet. "We have about 15,000 fighters spread across 12 main bunkers. Food will last another 8 months if we're careful. Weapons are the bigger problem. We're running low on everything except basic guns." "What about Project Daybreak?" Sang-hyuk asked quietly. Tae-sung looked around, then lowered his voice. "Dr. Kang reports progress. She wants to meet with you." Sang-hyuk nodded. "I'll go to her lab now. Keep me updated on Europa." As he walked through the crowded tunnels of the bunker, Sang-hyuk saw the faces of survivors. Some looked hopeless, but others showed something different, a hard, burning look that he recognized. It was the same look he saw in the mirror each morning. Not just anger, but resolve. The Narak had expected humans to give up. They were wrong. Deep in the most secure part of Bunker 7, Sun Mi-kang worked with a small team of scientists. They had set up their lab around pieces of a crashed Narak ship. The alien metal gleamed under the bright lights. "The energy signature is unlike anything we've seen before," Sun Mi explained to her team. "It's not just advanced technology, it's a different approach to physics itself." Dr. Hyun-woo Shin, a specialist in alien biology, looked up from his microscope. "Same with their bodies. The 2 dead Narak we recovered show signs of neural networks that connect to their ships. I think they literally become part of their weapons." Sun Mi walked to a large whiteboard covered in complex equations. "That's why their ships seem to think as one. They're not just flying them. They're merging with them." The door opened, and Colonel Sang-hyuk entered. The scientist stood straighter. "Dr. Kang," he said with a small bow, "I hear you have news." Sun Mi led him to a sealed container at the center of the lab. Inside was a small device made of both human and Narak technology. "We call it Sundown," she said. "It's a prototype, but the tests are promising." "What does it do?" Sun Mi's eyes had dark circles under them, but they shone with fierce intelligence. "It disrupts the quantum field that the Narak use to connect their minds. Think of it as causing a seizure in their group brain. In theory, it could shut down their entire command structure at once." Sang-hyuk stared at the small device. "In theory. We need to test it on a live Narak ship, a big one with many connected minds." "That's suicide." Sun Mi shrugged. "Maybe. But we're all dead anyway if we do nothing." Sang-hyuk was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I'll bring this to Director Lee. Start planning how we would deliver this device to a Narak command ship." As he turned to leave, Sun Mi called after him. "Colonel, my parents died in Seoul. My sister was on a ship that tried to escape Earth. Everyone I loved is gone." Her voice was steady. "I'm not afraid to die. I just want it to mean something." Sang-hyuk looked at her and the other scientists. None of them showed fear. "If this works, Dr. Kang, it will mean everything." In orbit around Earth, Commander Ta-ho Kim's ship, the Dauntless, hid in the shadow of a dead satellite. The once proud warship was now scared and patched. Its crew had been fighting a guerrilla war against the Narak for months. 2 Narak patrols coming around the planet. Lieutenant Jun reported from his station. Standard search pattern. Let them pass, Taiho ordered. Save our power for the supply raid. The bridge was dim, running on low power to avoid detection. Most of the crew were at their stations, watching screens and readouts with practiced eyes. "Sir," said Jun, "we're receiving a coded message from Earth. Priority Alpha." Taiho straightened in his chair, put it through to my station. He read the message twice, then looked up at his senior officers. "We have new orders. Bunker 7 has developed a weapon that could turn the tide. We're to prepare for a major operation." Captain Min Ho Baek, his tactical officer, leaned forward. "What kind of operation?" "The kind that will either save humanity or finish us off," Taiho said grimly. "We need to get a strike team onto the Nerak command ship." The officers looked at each other. No human had ever boarded a major Nerak vessel and lived to tell about it. "We'll need a diversion," Min Ho said, already thinking of plans. "The biggest one possible," Taiho agreed. "And we'll need a Nerak shuttle." "Sir," Jum said hesitantly, "even if we get a team on board, how will they find their way? We know almost nothing about the inside of their ships." Taiho pulled up an image on his screen. It showed a young woman with determined eyes. "This is Dr. Sun Mi Kang. She studied the Nerak more than anyone. She'll be going with the strike team." He paused. "Along with me." The bridge went silent. June started to protest, but Taiho held up his hand. "This is too important to delegate. I'll lead the insertion team myself." On the plains that were once called Africa, Captain Yunji Ryo led her small squad through the ruins of the city. They moved silently, their faces covered with masks to protect against the Nerak radiation. "Contact, 2 o'clock, whispered Sergeant Du Hyun Nam, pointing ahead. Through broken walls, they could see 3 Nerak soldiers. The aliens were tall and thin, with gray skin that seemed to shimmer. They wore no suits. The poisoned air didn't bother them. "Hold position," Yunji ordered. Her squad froze, becoming part of the rubble around them. The Nerak moved through the ruins, their 3-fingered hands holding weapons that glowed with red energy. They seemed to be searching for something. Yunji's radio buzzed softly. She answered it with a touch to her collar. "Captain Ryu," came a voice she didn't recognize. "This is Colonel Sang Hyuk Yoon. Your team is being reassigned to a special mission. Return to Base Echo for immediate extraction." Yunji frowned. Her team was supposed to gather intelligence on Nerak patrols for another week. "May I ask the nature of the mission, sir?" There was a pause before the colonel answered. "It's called Operation Sundown. You've been specifically requested because of your stealth record." Yunji looked at her team. The best infiltration squad left in Earth's forces. They had survived dozens of missions behind Nerak lines. "Understood, sir. We'll head to Echo now." As they carefully backed away from the Nerak patrol, Sergeant Nam moved beside her. "Special mission?" he asked quietly. Yunji shrugged. "All I know is that it's important enough to pull us off recon." "Must be big," said Private Jaiho Kwan, the youngest of their group. "Maybe we're finally hitting back for real." "Maybe," Yunji said, though she doubted it. Humanity had been losing this war from day one. What could change that now? She didn't know that in Bunker 7, Sun Mi Kang was putting the finishing touches on a device that might answer that question. She didn't know that across what remained of human territory, a desperate plan was being set in motion. All Yunji knew was that for 6 months, humanity had been dying slowly. Perhaps it was time to risk everything on one last throw of the dice. As her team moved through the dead city toward their pickup point, a Nerak ship passed overhead. Its red lights cast bloody shadows across the ruins. "One day," Jaiho whispered, staring up at the enemy craft, "they'll regret ever coming here." Yunji said nothing, but she silently agreed. If humans were going to die, they would make sure the Nerak remembered them forever. The stars themselves would witness humanity's last stand. The meeting room in Bunker 7 was crowded. Around a large metal table sat the leaders of what remained of humanity's forces. Maps and plans covered the walls. The air was stale from too many people breathing it for too long. Director Hannah Lee stood at the head of the table. Her hair had more gray now, and deep lines marked her face. But her eyes were sharp and clear. "This is Operation Sundown," she said, pointing to a hologram of a massive Nerak ship. "Our one chance to strike back." Colonel Sang-hyuk Yoon stepped forward. "The plan has 3 parts. First, all remaining human forces will launch attacks across Earth and the solar system. This will draw Nerak attention away from their command ship." He pointed to a different part of the hologram. "Second, Commander Kim will lead the Dauntless and our last 2 warships in an attack on the Nerak fleet above Earth. This will create more confusion." Hannah nodded. "And third, a small team will board the Nerak command ship and plant Dr. Kang's device at the heart of their neural network." The room was silent. Everyone knew this was a desperate plan. "Questions?" Hannah asked. "Who will lead the boarding team?" asked General Yu. "I will," said Sang-hyuk, "along with our best Special Forces team, Dr. Kang and Dr. Shin." Sun Mei Kang sat quietly at the far end of the table. The sundown device was in a case at her feet. It had taken everything she knew about quantum physics and everything they had learned from studying the Nerak to build it. "The shuttle will launch in 10 hours, Hannah said. "All other forces should be in position by then." She looked around the room. "This may be our last chance. Make it count." As people left to prepare, Sun Mi stayed behind. Hannah walked over to her. "Are you sure about this, Dr. Kang?" she asked quietly. "We could send someone else to activate the device." Sun Mi shook her head. "No, I built it. I need to make sure it works." She looked up at the older woman. "Besides, I have nothing left to lose." Hannah put a hand on her shoulder. "None of us do. That's why we'll win." On the Dauntless, Commander Tae-ho Kim briefed his crew. They stood in the ship's main hangar, where a captured Nerak shuttle sat like a dark insect. "This mission is volunteer only," he said. "I won't order anyone to board that ship." Captain Min Ho-baek stepped forward. "With respect, sir, I'll fly the shuttle. I study their controls more than anyone." "I'll go too," said Lieutenant Jun Park. "Someone needs to watch your back, Commander." One by one, crew members volunteered until Tae-ho had to stop them. "We need people here too," he reminded them. "The Dauntless must keep fighting." In the end, 5 crew members would join the mission from the Dauntless. They would meet Colonel Yoon and the others at a hidden base in what was once called the Pacific Ocean. Tae-ho looked at his volunteers. "Get some rest. We launch in 6 hours." As the others left, Jun stayed behind. "Sir, do you really think this will work?" Tae-ho looked at the Nerak shuttle. "It has to work, Jun. Otherwise, this is the end of humanity." Captain Yoonji Ryu trained with her team in a large room deep in Bunker 7. They practiced moving in zero gravity and studied the limited maps they had of Nerak ships. "Their corridors are narrow," she told her squad. "We stay tight, move fast, and protect the scientists at all costs." Sergeant Do Hyun Nam checked his weapons for the 10th time. "What about their internal defenses?" "Unknown," Yoonji admitted. "Dr. Shin says they rely more on their connected minds than on automatic systems. Once we're inside, we'll have to adapt." Private Jai-ho Kwan looked nervous but determined. "How will we know if the device works?" Yoonji shrugged. "Dr. Kang says we'll know. The effect should be immediate." She didn't add the part that worried her most. They would be at the heart of the Nerak command ship when it happened. No one knew what would happen to humans so close to the device when it activated. Colonel Sang-hyuk entered the room, followed by Dr. Hyun-woo Shin, the xenobiologist. Dr. Shin was tall and thin, with glasses that kept sliding down his nose. "Captain," Sang-hyuk said, "your team is the best we have left. This mission rests on your skills." Yoonji nodded. "We won't let you down, sir." Dr. Shin stepped forward with a tablet. I've updated the maps based on new information. The central neural chamber should be here. He pointed to a spot on the screen. That's where we need to plant the device. And the Narek themselves? Yunji asked. They will be connected to the ship, Dr. Shin explained. In a way, they become the ship when they're linked to the neural network. That's why we can disrupt their entire fleet at once. Yunji looked at her team. They had fought the Narek for months, but always from a distance. Going onto their ship was different. We leave in 3 hours, Sang-hyuk announced. Be ready. The sky above Earth was filled with Narek ships. Their black hulls and red lights made them look like angry stars. At the center of their fleet hung the command ship, 5 times larger than any other vessel. Hidden behind Earth's moon, 3 human ships prepared for battle. The Dauntless led the small fleet, with the Defiant and the Courage flanking it. Inside the captured Narek shuttle, the mission team made final checks. 12 people were crammed into the small craft. Colonel Sang-hyuk Yoon, mission commander. Commander Tae-ho Kim from the Dauntless. Captain Yoon-ji Ryu and her 3-person Special Forces team. Lieutenant Jun Park and Captain Min-ho Baek from the Dauntless. Dr. Sun Mi-kang with the Sundown device. Dr. Hyun-woo Shin, the xenobiologist. 2 technicians to help with Narek systems. Captain Min-ho sat at the controls, his hands moving over the alien interface. It's responding, he said. We're good to go. Sang-hyuk looked at Sun-mi. Is the device ready? She nodded, her face pale but determined. Once we reach the neural chamber, I'll need 3 minutes to set it up. You'll have them, Yunji promised. A voice came over their comms. All forces are in position, said Director Lee from Bunker 7. The attack begins in 5 minutes. Sang-hyuk looked at his team. This is it. For Earth. For Earth, they echoed. Across the solar system, what remained of humanity launched their attack. On Mars, hidden fighters hit Narek bases with stolen weapons. On Europa, the last human outpost fired all their missiles at once. On Earth, resistance fighters rose from underground bunkers to attack Narek patrols. And from behind the moon, the Dauntless, the Defiant, and the Courage charged toward the Narek fleet, guns blazing. The Narek responded immediately. Their ships moved as one, turning to face the threats. But the attacks came from so many places that even their linked minds struggled to respond. In the confusion, a single Narek shuttle approached the massive command ship. It sent the correct codes taken from a captured Narek officer. We're in, Min-ho said, as the shuttle entered the huge hangar of the command ship. No alarms yet. The team moved quickly, exiting the shuttle in pairs. The inside of the Narek ship was strange, more like a living thing than a machine. The walls pulsed with red light. The air was thick and smelled like metal. This way, Dr. Shin whispered, looking at his tablet. The neural chamber should be 2 levels up. They moved through narrow corridors, their weapons ready. Twice they had to hide as Narek soldiers passed. The aliens moved with odd, jerky steps, their gray skin reflecting the red lights. They're distracted by the attacks, Yunji noted, just as we planned. They reached a large vertical shaft. We need to climb, Dr. Shin said, pointing up. One by one, they climbed the ladder-like structures on the wall. Colonel Sang-hyuk led, with Yunji's team spread out to protect the scientists. As they reached the upper level, an alarm sounded. Harsh, screeching noises filled the air. They know we're here, Commander Tae-ho said. We need to move faster. They ran down a wide corridor, following Dr. Shin's directions. Ahead, they could see a large door guarded by 4 Narek soldiers. Cover me, Yunji said. She and her team moved forward, firing their weapons. The Narek fired back, red energy blasts hitting the walls around them. Private Jai-ho was hit in the shoulder. He fell with a cry of pain. Sergeant Nam pulled him to safety while continuing to fire. Commander Tae-ho and Lieutenant Jun joined the fight. Together, They took down the Narak guards. The doors locked, Taiho said, examining the alien controls. I can open it, Captain Minho said. He worked quickly, his fingers moving over the strange symbols. The door slid open with a hiss. Inside was a vast chamber. Hundreds of pods lined the walls, each containing a Narak connected to glowing red tubes. In the center of the room was a pillar of swirling energy. The neural core, Dr. Shin said in awe. It's more beautiful than I imagined. Set up the device, Sang-hyuk ordered. Everyone else, defensive positions. As Sun Mei hurried to the central pillar with the sundown device, more alarms sounded. The doors on the far side of the chamber opened, and Narak soldiers poured in. Hold them back, Sang-hyuk shouted. Give Dr. Kang time. The team formed a semicircle, firing at the approaching Narak. The air filled with energy blasts from both sides. Lieutenant Jun fell, a hole burned through his chest. Dr. Shin was hit in the leg, but kept working with Sun Mai on the device. How much longer? Taiho asked, firing his weapon. Almost there, Sun Mai said, her hand steady as she connected the device to the neural core. 30 more seconds. A Narak blast hit Colonel Sang-hyuk in the side. He stumbled but stayed on his feet, still firing. 20 seconds. Sun Mai called. More Narak poured into the room. Private Jai-ho, despite his wounded shoulder, threw their last explosives, buying precious time. 10 seconds, Sun Mai said. Yeon-ji took a hit to her arm, but kept protecting the scientists. 5, 4, 3, Sun Li counted down. A Narak soldier broke through their line, heading straight for Sun Mi. 2, 1, she said. Taiho threw himself at the Narak, knocking it away from Sun Mi. Now, she shouted, pressing the final control. The sundown device activated. A wave of blue-white energy spread from it, flowing through the neural core and into each connected Narak. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, as one, the Narak soldiers froze. Their bodies shook. Strange sounds came from their mouths. The energy in the chamber changed from red to blue-white. It spread through the walls, the floor, the ceiling. It's working, Sun Mai said, her eyes wide. It's affecting the entire neural network. Around them, the Narak command ship began to shake. We need to get out of here, Sang-hyuk said, holding his wounded side. Back to the shuttle. Now. As they ran from the chamber, they could feel the ship changing around them. The walls stopped pulsing. The red lights flickered and died. Through the windows, they could see other Narak ships drifting aimlessly or crashing into each other. Humanity had struck back. The tide of war had turned, but they still had to escape the dying heart of the Narak fleet. The team ran through the shaking corridors of the Narak command ship. Emergency lights flashed blue and white instead of the usual red. Strange sounds, like thousands of voices crying out at once, echoed through the ship. What's happening to them? Captain Minho asked as they rushed back toward the hangar. Neural collapse, Dr. Sun Mi Kang explained between breaths. The sundown device broke their hive-mind connection. It's like they're all having seizures at once. Colonel Sang-hyuk Yoon led the way, one hand pressed against his wounded side. Commander Tae-ho Kim helped the injured Dr. Shin, while Captain Yeon-ji Ryu and Surgeon Nam carried the badly wounded Private Jai-ho. The ship is dying, Dr. Shin said, looking at the walls. They're so connected to their technology that when their minds break, the ships break too. They turned a corner and found 3 Narak soldiers blocking their path. Unlike before, the aliens moved strangely, twitching and stumbling like broken puppets. They fired their weapons wildly, hitting walls and ceiling. Take cover, Sang-hyuk shouted. Yeon-ji set Jae-ho down and took aim with her rifle. She fired 3 precise shots, and the confused Narak fell. They can't coordinate anymore, she said. They're fighting on instinct now. The team pushed forward. When they reached the vertical shaft they had climbed earlier, they found that the power was failing. The ladder-like structures were breaking apart. "We'll have to jump and slide," Taiho said. "I'll go first." One by one, they made the dangerous descent, catching themselves on the broken pieces of the ladder. Minho lost his grip and fell the last few meters, landing hard on his ankle. Taiho helped him up. "Can you walk?" Minho nodded, though his face was tight with pain. "I can make it." As they neared the hangar, they heard a massive explosion above them. The ship shuddered violently. "The neural core must have overloaded," Sunmai said. "This whole ship could blow any minute." The hangar was chaos. Nerak soldiers wandered aimlessly or fought each other in confusion. Some had collapsed entirely. Smaller ships were crashing into walls as their pilots lost control. "There's our shuttle," Sang-hyuk pointed. It was still where they had left it, though a damaged Nerak fighter had crashed nearby. "Cover me," Minho said. Despite his injured ankle, he limped quickly to the shuttle and began the startup sequence. The rest of the team formed a defensive circle, firing at any Nerak that came too close. Most of the aliens were too disoriented to be a serious threat, but their random attacks were still dangerous. "Shuttle's ready," Minho called from the cockpit. "Let's go." They backed toward the shuttle, still firing. Just as they reached it, a huge explosion rocked the hangar. Part of the ceiling collapsed, crushing several Nerak ships. "Inside, now," Sang-hyuk ordered. They piled into the shuttle. Minho's hands flew over the controls, and the engines hummed to life. A shuttle lifted off the hangar floor just as another explosion shook the ship. "The hangar doors are closing," Yunji shouted, pointing ahead. "Hold on," Minho said grimly. He pushed the shuttle to full speed, aiming for the narrowing gap. Metal scraped against metal as they squeezed through the barely opened doors and into space. Outside, the view was incredible and terrifying. The massive Nerak command ship was breaking apart behind them. All around, Nerak vessels drifted or spun out of control. Some collided with each other in massive explosions. Others fired weapons randomly. "Look," Dr. Shin pointed to the side. Through a gap in the chaos, they could see Earth, the blue planet still scared by the Nerak attacks, but somehow more beautiful than ever. "The Dauntless," Taiho said suddenly. "Can we contact them?" Minho tried the communication system. "Dauntless, this is Captain Bake. Do you read me?" Static. Then a voice broke through. "Captain, this is Dauntless. We see you. What's your status?" "Mission accomplished," Minho replied. The device worked. "We're coming home." "Understood. We'll clear you a path." As they watched, the Dauntless and the two other human ships began firing at the disabled Nerak vessels, creating a safe corridor for the shuttle to pass through. "We did it," Sunmai said quietly, looking at her hands. "We actually did it." Colonel Sang-hyuk nodded, his face pale from blood loss but smiling slightly. "Humanity survives another day." 3 months later, Director Han Ali stood before a crowd in what was once a Nerak landing zone. Now, humans work to clear away alien technology and rebuild their world. "Today we remember those we lost," she said, "and we celebrate what we saved." The crowd was silent. Everyone had lost someone in the war. But for the first time in over a year, there was hope. "The Nerak Collective has been destroyed," Hana continued. "Their neural network collapsed completely when the sundown device activated. The few survivors have fled our solar system." She gestured to where Commander Taho Kim and Colonel Sang-hyuk Yoon stood with their teams. "These brave people, and many others, made our victory possible. But the true hero of Earth was science, and the human spirit that drives it forward even in our darkest hour." Dr. Sun Mi Kang stood to the side, uncomfortable with the attention. Since the mission, she had turned her focus to understanding Nerak technology and helping Earth rebuild. After the ceremony, a young officer approached Sunmei. "Dr. Kang, there's something you should know. We've been monitoring deep space communications, Word of what happened here has spread to other systems. Sun Mi frowned. What do you mean? There are other civilizations out there, many of them. They were watching our fight with the Narek. And now, the officer hesitated. Now what? Sun Mi asked. Now they're afraid of us. Captain Yunji Ryu stood on the bridge of the Dauntless, now repaired and upgraded with Narek technology. As head of security, she oversaw the ship's defense systems. Unknown vessel approaching, Captain, she reported to Taiho, who now commanded not just the Dauntless but Earth's growing fleet. Identification, Taiho asked. Not Narek. Design is completely new. The main screen showed a sleek ship, silver and blue, approaching slowly. They're sending a transmission, Communications Officer Yunyi Park announced. She had taken over after Lieutenant Jun's death. Put it through, Taiho ordered. A face appeared on screen, humanoid but clearly alien, with pale blue skin and large silver eyes. People of Earth, the alien said in careful, practiced human language. I am Ambassador Telrin of the Galactic Concord. We come in peace and recognition. Taiho exchanged looks with Yunji. Ambassador, this is Commander Kim of Earth. We welcome you. We have watched your struggle, Telrin said. No species has ever defeated the Narek Collective. What you did was unprecedented. There was something in the ambassador's voice, respect, but also fear. We wish to establish diplomatic relations, Telrin continued, and to offer assistance in rebuilding your world. We would welcome that, Taiho said carefully. After the transmission ended, Yunji turned to Taiho. They're afraid of us, aren't they? Taiho nodded slowly. They saw what humans do when pushed to the edge. I would be afraid too. 1 year after the Narek defeat, Earth was healing. Green was returning to scorched lands. Cities were being rebuilt. The population, so drastically reduced during the war, was slowly growing again. In what had once been Seoul, Sun Mi Kang stood in her new research center. Through the window, she could see construction crews working on new buildings. Children played in a nearby park, something that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Director Hannah Lee, now head of Earth's new government, entered the room. The Galactic Concord representatives are impressed with our progress, she said. They've accepted our conditions for joining their alliance. Sun Mi nodded. And they still fear us. Yes, Hannah admitted. The quantum effect of the sundown device was detected across half the galaxy. They now call us the species that broke physics to survive. Sun Mi looked down at her latest project, a peaceful application of the technology they had developed to defeat the Narek. I never wanted us to be feared, she said quietly. Fear can protect us, Hannah replied. But it's not all they feel. There's respect too, and curiosity. She paused. 7 other civilizations have requested scientific exchanges with us. They want to learn from humans. Sun Mi smiled slightly. Then we'll teach them, and learn from them too. At the new space station orbiting Earth, Commander Taiho Kim watched ships coming and going, human vessels alongside those of their new allies. Colonel Sang-hyuk Yoon, now in charge of Earth's defense forces, stood beside him. We're expanding faster than I thought possible, Sang-hyuk said. 5 new colonies established this year alone. We've always been good at rebuilding, Taiho replied. And now we have help. A massive ship passed below them, an Earth vessel built with technology, learned from the Galactic Concord. It was heading to the edge of the solar system, the first of many exploration ships. Do you think we'll face another threat like the Narek? Sang-hyuk asked. Taiho was quiet for a moment. I hope not. But if we do, we'll be ready. The stars know what happens when you push humanity too far. In her office on Earth, Sun Mi Kang wrote in her personal journal, the universe learned what happens when you push humanity to the edge. We learned that our greatest strength isn't our rage, but what rises from its ashes. Our unbreakable determination to create a better future, no matter the odds. The stars no longer fear just humanity's rage. They respect humanity's resilience, and perhaps in time, they will come to value our friendship most of all. Outside her window, the sun set on a world forever changed. A world that had faced extinction and emerged stronger. A world ready to take its place among the stars. Not as conquerors, not as victims, but as survivors who had learned the true cost of war and the true value of peace.